The morning sun poured over Serenity Oaks like warm honey, turning every lawn into a flawless emerald carpet that screamed, "We follow the rules." At the center of the cul-de-sac stood Karen Langley's sprawling colonial, the unofficial palace of Harmony Hills. HOA Karen herself floated across her perfectly edged patio in a pastel pink pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. Clipboard in one hand, mimosa in the other, smiling that smile everyone knew was as fake as her community first speeches. I was Sarah Ellison, 38, the freelance compliance consultant who'd moved here 2 years ago for the quiet suburban life. Quiet? Try suffocating. Karen had turned the HOA bylaws into her personal Bible, and she preached it with the fervor of a televangelist who discovered sin in every blade of grass longer than 2 inches. My tiny violation last spring, a discreet solar panel on the side roof that technically needed board approval, had marked me as public enemy number 1. 3 $250 fines in 6 months. Each one delivered with a handwritten note. Standards matter. Dear, today was the annual HOA Appreciation Brunch, hosted right here on Karen's patio. Neighbors milled around in their Sunday best, laughing nervously at Karen's jokes about those people who think rules are suggestions. I sat at the end of the long linen table, fork poised over my eggs Benedict, playing the part of the polite resident. Mark, the retired accountant from down the street, and his wife Amelia hung on Karen's every word like disciples. Karen raised her mimosa, the crystal catching the light like a crown. "You know, darlings," she began in that syrupy voice that could curdle milk, "we've had a few challenging residents lately, the kind who test our patience." Her eyes flicked to me for half a second. At a certain point, you run the numbers and realize it's just cheaper to keep her. The table erupted in brittle laughter. Mark slapped his knee. Amelia tittered behind her napkin. The joke wasn't about some hedge fund guy. It was about me. I was the line item on Karen's budget, the nuisance whose fines padded the HOA treasury more than the legal hassle of eviction proceedings ever could. I set my fork down. The soft clink sounded like a starter pistol in my ears. No one saw the storm brewing behind my calm smile. They didn't know that inside my designer tote, another gift from the community fund I'd quietly questioned last year, sat my phone with a single audio file labeled Langley Contractor Clubhouse 0723. One tap and Karen's empire of pastel tyranny would crumble like the cheap stucco on her illegally expanded pool house. I had come to Serenity Oaks broken from a bad divorce, looking for peace. Instead, I found Karen's kingdom, rules banning political signs longer than 1 week, dictating mailbox colors to heritage beige, fining kids for leaving bikes on the driveway after 6 p.m. I'd paid every fine without complaint, smiled at every inspection, because I knew how these things worked. I used to write corporate compliance manuals. I knew loopholes the way Karen knew passive-aggressive emojis in the HOA app. So while everyone laughed, I'll let my mind drift back 6 months. It started the day Karen's crew accidentally painted my curb the wrong shade of gray, another $150 violation. But that same week, I noticed the HOA Treasurer's Report had a mysterious $18,000 line item for emergency landscaping with no receipts. Karen had waved it off at the last meeting. Just trust the board. Neighbors. Details are boring. I didn't trust. I started watching. Quietly. Patiently. The way a compliance officer audits a shady CFO. I volunteered for the safety committee no one else wanted, suggesting we install a new audio diagnostic system in the clubhouse for liability protection during meetings. Karen loved the idea, more control for her. She signed the work order herself. What she didn't know was that the tiny high-fidelity mic fed straight to my secure server. The first real break came on a humid Thursday night. I was reviewing the feed while pretending to watch Netflix. The clubhouse door clicked. Karen's voice, breathy and conspiratorial. "Brad, The bids are locked. Your company gets the full pool renovation contract. No competitive quotes this time. Brad, the contractor she'd been dating on the side, chuckled. And the extra 20% goes straight to that offshore account we set up under Reed Landscaping LLC. Right? My name on paper. Your cut under the table. Karen laughed. The same laugh she used when finding me. Exactly. The residents will never know their dues are funding my new infinity edge. And if that Ellison woman keeps complaining about her solar panels, we just triple her fines. Cheaper to keep her paying than to fight her in court. My blood ran cold, but my hand stayed steady. I saved the file. Then I dug deeper. Public records showed Reed Landscaping LLC registered 3 weeks after Brad started volunteering on HOA projects. Karen's own backyard now boasted an unpermitted pool deck that violated every setback rule she enforced on the rest of us. Her husband's signature was forged on the approval forms. Turns out he'd been out of town for months. Classic embezzlement wrapped in pastel perfection. Back at the brunch table, Karen was still holding court, gesturing with her fork like a queen. We simply cannot let standards slip. One bad apple. She glanced at me again. I met her eyes with a small, tight smile. Perfect, I said, voice even, just admiring the view. She bought it. Of course she did. In her world, I was the fixed asset, predictable, profitable, powerless. She had no idea the woman across the table had already rewritten the bylaws in her head. The trap was set. The neighbors were seated. All I needed was the perfect moment to hit play. Her laughter rang out again, rich and performative. I watched Mark and Amelia lean in, captivated, and felt the decade of quiet endurance click into place. This wasn't just about my solar panels anymore. This was about every ridiculous rule, every selective enforcement, every neighbor who'd look the other way while Karen turned a homeowners association into her personal fiefdom. I picked up my mimosa, the cold glass steady in my hand. The trap was armed. The audience was perfect. And Karen Langley, Queen of Serenity Oaks, had no clue that the rules she worshipped were about to enforce themselves, right in her own backyard. The shift had started so subtly I almost missed it. 2 years ago, I was the new resident everyone welcomed with casserole and HOA orientation packets. Karen herself had shown me around, gushing about our little slice of perfection. Then came the first fine. My welcome mat had the wrong shade of heritage beige, $75. I paid. Then the solar panels. Then the political yard sign that stayed up one day too long. Each time Karen delivered the notice personally, pearls gleaming, voice dripping concern. We're all in this together. Sarah dear. But I saw the pattern. The same way I used to spot fraudulent expense reports in my old corporate job. Karen's house broke every rule she wrote. Her pool addition never submitted. Her contractor boyfriend Brad's trucks, parked overnight, ignored. Meanwhile, my neighbor's American flag flew exactly 27 days past the holiday-only limit and got slapped with a $500 notice. Selective enforcement wasn't a bug. It was the business model. I started keeping my own ledger. Every fine, every meeting minute, every suspiciously round number in the treasurer's reports. I attended every Zoom board meeting, camera off, taking notes no one knew about. When Karen pushed through a $40,000 emergency roof repair for the clubhouse that somehow benefited Brad's company, I quietly requested the bids under the new transparency policy I'd helped draft. There were none. Just a single invoice from Reed Landscaping LLC. The night I installed the diagnostic system was pure poetry. Karen had bragged about it at the previous meeting. Sarah's idea is brilliant. Modern security for our precious clubhouse. She signed the approval form with a flourish, never noticing the mic was routed only to me. For 3 days, it recorded nothing but endless complaints about those people who let their grass grow to 2.1 inches. Then, on night 3, The real show began. Are they gone? Brad's voice, low and greedy. Finally, Karen purred. The merger, sorry. The big community pool project is locked. Your company gets the contract. No questions. I'll push the extra $75,000 through as consulting services. My cut goes to the LLC. No one will trace it. Papers rustled. I heard the kiss wet, triumphant. Then the real bomb. That Ellison woman keeps poking around. We triple her fines next quarter. Cheaper to keep her bleeding cash than to risk her digging into the books. She's useful. Actually, her payments keep the treasury fat. My stomach tightened, but I kept listening. They discussed forged signatures on my neighbor's violation notices. How Karen had deleted emails proving she'd waived rules for board friends. And the offshore account where the skim dues were parked. It wasn't just petty tyranny. It was felony-level embezzlement wrapped in HOA legalese. I labeled the file, backed it up 3 ways, and waited, because I knew Karen's type. She'd keep pushing. She always did. 3 weeks later, the escalation hit. My solar panels were suddenly a safety hazard. Under a new emergency rule she rammed through at a special meeting I wasn't notified about. Another $300 fine. Then came the anonymous letter in every mailbox. Certain residents continue to undermine our standards. Everyone knew it was about me. Neighbors started avoiding my driveway. Mark actually crossed the street when he saw me. But I stayed silent, smiled at the inspections, paid every fine, because every dollar they took was another nail in Karen's coffin. I traced the LLC to a P.O. box in the next county, registered solely in Brad's name, but with Karen's personal email on the incorporation papers. I pulled the state business registry, the forged bid documents, even the security footage I'd quietly requested showing Brad's truck at Karen's house at 2 a.m. on board meeting nights. The final piece dropped the week before the brunch. Karen called a confidential board session in the clubhouse to discuss the Ellison problem. The mic caught every word. She outlined a plan to fabricate a petition to remove me from the neighborhood, using dues money to hire a lawyer, her cousin. Of course, we'll frame it as community protection. The fines she's paid will cover the legal fees. Win-win. Brad laughed. And once she's gone, we finished the pool expansion with a leftover skim. I sat in my dark home office that night, headphones on, listening to the woman who'd call me dear plot my financial and social execution. The rage was there, hot and tectonic, but it cooled into something sharper, clarity. She had used the very rules I helped maintain as weapons. Now I would use them as the blade that cut her down. I transferred the cleanest segment of the recording to my phone, encrypted the backups, and printed a single timeline of every violation, every dollar, every lie. Then I deleted the evidence trail from my work computer and waited for the brunch invitation I knew would come. Karen loved an audience. The morning of the event, I chose my outfit carefully, simple white blouse, tailored jeans, the kind of harmless resident look that made tyrants underestimate you. I slipped the phone into my tote, volume set to maximum. As I walked across the cul-de-sac, neighbors waved nervously. They had no idea they were about to witness the fall of their queen. At the table, Karen was already performing, recounting how she'd saved the neighborhood from that terrible flag incident last year. I sat opposite her, fork steady, my miles ahead. The recording was cued. The neighbors were seated, and when she raised her glass again, smirking directly at me as she repeated the line, "It's just cheaper to keep her," I knew the moment had arrived. My hand slipped into the tote. Thumb found the screen. One tap. The audio began low but crystal clear in the sudden hush. Karen's own voice filled the patio. Triple her fines cheaper to keep her bleeding cash. The laughter died instantly. The mimosa glasses froze halfway to lips. Mark's fork hovered above his steak like he'd been paused mid-bite. Amelia's perpetual smile cracked into something resembling panic. Karen's face, Karen's face was a masterpiece of dawning horror. The color drained from her cheeks in real time, leaving two perfect circles of rouge floating like clown makeup on a corpse. My voice stayed conversational, almost gentle. "What do you think? Karen? Is she worth keeping?" She shot a desperate glance at Brad, who was suddenly very interested in his quinoa salad. The recording played on mercilessly. "The extra 20% goes straight to that offshore account, my new infinity edge, the rustle of papers. The kiss. The casual plotting to fabricate my removal. Every neighbor heard it. Every absurd, hypocritical, criminal detail." Karen tried to laugh it off. The sound strangled and brittle. "This is clearly edited. Deepfake nonsense. Sarah, how dare you?" I simply raised an eyebrow and let the file continue. Her voice again, crystal clear. "We'll frame it as community protection. The fine she's paid will cover the legal fees." The patio had gone graveyard silent, except for the audio and the distant hum of a lawnmower 2 streets over. I watched the realization spread like poison. The same people who'd laughed at her joke minutes ago were now staring at their queen like she'd grown a second head. Mrs. Henderson from the corner house clutched her pearls so hard they might actually snap. Karen stood up so fast her chair scraped backward. "This meeting is over. Everyone inside now." No one moved. Mark actually shook his head. "Karen, is this real?" I finally stopped the recording. Every word. Time-stamped. Backed up 6 ways. "And before you call the police, remember, I installed the system you personally approved. Corporate, no. HOA, security measure. You signed the work order. You consented." Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. The woman who'd spent years lecturing us on standards was now the living embodiment of every rule she'd broken. I could see the calculations racing behind her eyes, the state oversight board, the potential felony charges, the loss of her precious presidency. I placed a crisp $100 bill on the table, enough for my untouched meal and a generous tip, and stood. "Enjoy the rest of your brunch. I hear the pool expansion bids are due next week. Might want to actually open them this time." As I walked away, heels clicking on the perfect paver path, I heard the first real murmur start. "I always thought her pool looked illegal. My fines paid for that. We need an emergency meeting without her." The trap had sprung. Now came the cleanup. That afternoon, I sent the full file bundle anonymously to the Illinois HOA Regulatory Commission, the local district attorney, and every single homeowner on the Serenity Oaks email list. Subject line: fiduciary breach and embezzlement evidence for immediate review. No drama, just facts. The machine I'd set in motion ran on autopilot after that. By Monday, the cul-de-sac was buzzing. Karen's driveway was blocked by 3 official-looking sedans. Board members were calling emergency meetings she wasn't invited to. My phone wouldn't stop. Neighbors I hadn't spoken to in months suddenly wanted to chat. I answered exactly 0. I was done playing nice. The investigation moved with terrifying efficiency. Forensic accountants descended on the HOA books. Reed Landscaping LLC was dismantled in 48 hours. The offshore account was frozen. Karen's pool was measured, photographed, and declared in violation of 12 separate bylaws, ironically the same one she'd used to find me. Brad was escorted off the property by sheriff's deputies after they found the forged signatures. Karen tried the victim route. She posted a tearful video on the HOA Facebook group. "I devoted my life to this community, and this is how I'm repaid?" Deep fakes and lies. The comments turned on her faster than a flipped switch. "We saw the recording. My $300 fine paid for your pool. Resign." I stayed in my house with the blinds drawn, sipping coffee and watching the numbers. The state commission scheduled a special hearing for Friday. Residents circulated a petition to remove her from the board, signed by 87% of the neighborhood within 36 hours. My solar panels? Suddenly approved retroactively with an apology letter from the new acting board. But the sweetest part came Wednesday night when my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered on speaker. Sarah. Karen's voice was raw, stripped of every ounce of syrup. You can't do this. My reputation, my position, everything I built. I let the silence stretch. You built it on stolen dues and selective rules. Karen, I simply played back the evidence. You recorded me illegally. I laughed once. Soft and genuine. The system you approved. The work order you signed. The consent form you clicked I agree on. You consented. Karen, go ahead and sue. I'd love to present the full timeline in open court. The line went dead. Friday's hearing room at the county courthouse smelled like stale coffee and desperation. Karen arrived in full armor, pearl necklace, power suit, lawyer in tow, but the armor had cracks. Her hands trembled as she clutched the podium. The commission chairman, a no-nonsense woman named Judge Ramirez, laid out the charges like a grocery list: embezzlement, forgery, breach of fiduciary duty, selective enforcement, rising to civil rights violations. Karen tried every trick. Tears, gaslighting. This is a personal vendetta from a disgruntled resident. I sat in the front row in a simple navy dress, hands folded, face calm. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't rant. I simply read from the timeline I'd prepared: dates, dollar amounts, audio timestamps, public records. Each fact landed like a hammer. By the time I finished, even Karen's lawyer looked ready to switch sides. The board was dissolved on the spot. Karen was removed effective immediately, ordered to repay $187,000 in misappropriated funds, and banned from ever serving on any HOA in the state. The courtroom erupted in quiet applause from the residents who'd shown up to watch. Outside on the courthouse steps, the press waited. Local news had picked up the story after the anonymous email leak. Microphones thrust forward. Mrs. Langley, any comment? Karen tried one last performance. This is political persecution. I stepped up beside her, voice steady for the cameras. No, Karen, this is accountability. The rules you wrote finally applied to you. The flashbulbs popped. Her face, caught forever in high definition, would be the thumbnail for every news story that night. That evening, my doorbell rang. The entire block had shown up with casseroles and apologies. Mark and Amelia led the charge. Heads bowed. We had no idea, Amelia whispered. We're so sorry. I accepted the food, smiled, and said exactly what they needed to hear. Let's fix it together. The new board, elected by landslide the following week, asked me to serve as interim president. I accepted on one condition. Every rule would be reviewed for fairness. No more pastel tyranny. Solar panels? Approved. Flags? Year-round. Kids' bikes? Stay outside as long as they want. The neighborhood voted yes, so fast the gavel barely hit the table. Karen's house went on the market 2 weeks later. She moved out under cover of darkness. U-Haul loaded with the same pastel furniture she'd used to project perfection. The new owners, a young couple with actual solar panels, waved at me the day they moved in. 3 months later, Serenity Oaks looked almost the same on the surface: flawless lawns, white fences, kids riding bikes, but the air felt different. Lighter. The HOA newsletter I now edited featured stories about community gardens instead of violation notices. My solar panels gleamed proudly on every roof that wanted them. I stood on my front porch one crisp Saturday morning, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise paint the cul-de-sac gold. No clipboard, no fines, just neighbors waving hello like normal people. The final loose and arrived by certified mail. Karen's divorce attorney, apparently her husband had finally seen the light too, sent the settlement papers. She'd agreed to drop all countersuits in exchange for me not pursuing the full criminal referral. I signed without hesitation. The check for my legal fees and emotional distress arrived the same week, enough to pay off the last of my old divorce debt and then some. I kept the USB drive anyway. Not for revenge. For proof. A small silver reminder that sometimes the most powerful weapon is simply pressing play. The new annual brunch happened on my patio this year. Same table. Same mimosas. But the vibe was pure celebration. Mark raised his glass. To Sarah, the woman who reminded us rules should protect people, not punish them. I laughed. Real and easy. To all of us. And to never again letting one Karen ruin the neighborhood. Later that night, I walked the quiet streets alone. Karen's old house had new lights. New laughter drifting from the windows. The infinity pool she'd stolen dues to build was now a community splash pad, funded properly, approved by vote. I stopped at the corner where her Standards Matter sign used to stand. Someone had replaced it with a simple wooden plaque the new board commissioned, Fairness First. I smiled at the dark sky. Revenge doesn't shout. It echoes. And in Serenity Oaks, the echo was finally one of freedom.